So you had some other questions, right?
Oh, yes. So many powerful reminders. Thank you again. Yeah, I think what you're lifting up and centering is so powerful because I think, and I think was in part moved to tears also just because I feel like that is part of sort of the mycelium or the connective tissues that I can even, somatically or in an embodied way feel like I'm moving through both throughout my life being African American and Japanese, but also in a lot of other capacities. I keep thinking about, when I used to teach, I was a substitute teacher slash paraprofessional in the San Francisco Unified School District for a while. And I remember some of my students would often, especially when I first started teaching and going regularly, not substituting, so they got to know me a little bit for a longer time. They would say, "Well, what are you? Like, which group are you?" And I often wouldn't answer that question because I could see that they would assume that the phenotype or the if I whatever box I check on the census is the one that means I'm going to be there for you. And I didn't want them to feel like that was the way that, they're the educator who's showing up, trying to show up as best I can every day. I wanted them to know that I am also with you, regardless of whether we share the same checked census box or what, how we hold those categories. And so I think, and I know that for some people that's very controversial in the sense that like there's often this kind of push and pull with mixed roots folks and saying like you have to pick one, or like if you don't say what you are, quote unquote, with scare quotes, then you're not like being proud enough, or not showing up enough. But sometimes I've found I've been experimenting a lot with solidarity building and what that means, and sometimes the racial science dialogue that gets you know, overlapped onto solidarity building is something I push against actively. And so some of the stories that you lift up, I think for me feel so powerful because it just reminds us that this is, my grandma would always say, know your history or you're doomed to repeat it. It's like, we've been doing this. Let's
Right,
keep building the muscle.
right. I have a dear friend who grew up in San Francisco, and his mother was, let me try to get this right. Well, his family was interned in one of the California camps. And I think his mother grew up or grew to a certain age in one of the camps. His dad is Black. He is Japanese and Black, like you identify. And he never talked in the way that you talk about his identity, but he would encourage people to think about what they're asking. And it's important to do that because in truth, all of us are a blend. This concept of pure race doesn't really exist unless we go to the most untouched places on the planet. And even then, I'm not sure, but there are some untouched places where people are indigenous and have not been tainted by imperialism or colonialism. However, the fact that we are mixed means something beautiful in a way, because we're carrying all these lineages within our very beings. And the DNA is also beautiful. And I think it's important to encourage, especially children. I work with children a lot. That's my favorite ever thing to do. Whenever I feel like adults are missing beats, and I am an adult, so I'm including myself. When I'm tired of it, when I'm tired of the talky talk and the too muchy much, then I go talk to children and they make sense. I don't care what color they are. They make sense. They all think racism is stupid, and that choosing parts of yourself is ridiculous. However, I also understand what it means through my son, who is biracial. His dad is Dutch English, white, white, white. And then there's me. And for him to walk through the world was very unpleasant because he didn't have identifiers, right? Physical
Yes.
identifiers as such
Mm-hmm.
that would make people think African American,
Mm-hmm.
unless they saw him with me. However, that's not any different than my mother, who was raised in the Jim Crow South, who her mother was raised, I think, on a plantation run by a French admiral. So my great grandmother, is that true? Is possibly French,
Wow.
indigenous, and Black. And we tend to think of that as Creole, and we tend to think of that as Louisiana, but it's more than Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
That had to do with slavery. That wasn't some choice. I made a choice, but that isn't a choice. And there's a big, it's not even nuance, which means more subtle. There's a big historical phenomenon that we often miss about how and why we look like we look. But helping my son navigate through his childhood and teenage, I didn't have the tools for it. I helped him. I'm who I am. But I also knew that the best thing for him to do is to talk to other biracial people and feel at home there in some way. And I always think of him, how he navigated the world. And I'll share a story. And maybe this has some resonance for you, I don't know. But maybe it has resonance for others. I do think it's different when the racial, when the gene pool is racially people of color rather than European and of color. And the reason why I say that is because of the construct we call race and what we do with that. It doesn't exist in science, as you know, as I know, as many of us know, but we further it.
Yes.
We really do further it. So one day when he was about 6, I was walking him to school in the morning because his school was in the neighborhood we were in Oakland. And I was walking him to school because he was too little to go on his own. And it wasn't far. And I enjoyed it. And there were these old guys that would like hang out by the bus stop because it had a bench and they had their brown paper bag with whatever they were drinking. You know those guys? I love them. I don't know if they would still be alive because that was 30 some years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'd walk by with them. How you doing, sis? How you doing? I'm good. How are you? Good morning. And my little son would say, good morning. And they would speak to him. And then one day we're walking home from school and he said, Mom, why when Dad walks me to school, he holds my hand really tight when we pass those old guys with their bags? Why? Isn't that a great question? And his father and I had a big conversation about it. Because, of course, fear is one of the reasons. And where does the fear come from? What you are told. And then you have a child and you want to protect that child. But from what? Those guys wouldn't harm a fly, as my mother would say. And he said, so why the difference? He holds my hand tight and we walk really fast. And he says good morning, but he says it really fast. And his dad is a kind man, very kind man. So we had to have a conversation about it. But then I would doubt, well, why did I bring this child into this world? Well, there's some spiritual reasons, like he kept hovering around in my dreams. And maybe, who knows why, but I wish I had better tools at that time. But I don't walk in his shoes. So I practice empathy. And I think that's one of the things we can all do. Practice empathy. Cultivate it. Make it a muscle that we make really strong. So we're thinking about all the people and all of their ways of being in our world. Does that make sense to you as a multiracial person?
Yes. The empathy part is big, and the construct of race without like highlighting that, without trying to undermine the understanding of how our racialized experiences affect our daily lives. But sometimes I think some of those points really stand out to me, in part because I just got so, even as a kid, so used to people using racial science to justify how I am, who I am, or how I should be, or all these different things. And it told me that that had a large influence in sort of the spaces that we were co-creating, whether that was a classroom or my teacher sharing the information, or, my classmates, that there was a lot to unpack and for us to realize that we learned and to reimagine. So I think those are really powerful. And I think, it's a funny thing with solidarity building spaces and like the quote unquote multiracial. I use the term mixed roots because, in part, because of all these kind of racialized science.
It's not science.
No, yeah, yeah, exactly. Thank you. I'm still untangling it from all of the language that has been shared. But even
Right.
those caucus groups can be really complex because my experience might be very different than someone who's been adopted and has like a Chinese parent and a parent from this place, and like we have I mean, that's true in most affinity groups, so to speak. But it's I think, including within that grouping, when we get grouped together as mixed roots people, or whatever that means for folks, and however they draw those lines, as you pointed out earlier, like that a lot of us have the mixed roots elements of who we be, that it just reminds me of that solidarity building as a practice and how it unfolds. And oftentimes I'm learning things in those spaces, even though people put us into the same boxes. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's like, right. And the son who I was talking about I have one daughter and two sons, and they all have different fathers. And that's a whole set of things in itself, as you can imagine. Doesn't matter who the fathers were and how they identify or any of that. Just that a woman has children with three different fathers. It's what's Chimamanda Adichie's talk called Danger of a Single Story.
Danger of a Single, yep.
We have a single story about single moms with lots of different fathers for their children. Well, there are really concrete reasons. One, the FBI COINTELPRO murdered the father of my firstborn, my daughter. If I had any choice in the matter, that would not have happened, but I didn't. So it goes on like that. All right. So one of the things that is difficult, that he said is difficult, even if he is in a room where the people are biracial, as he put it, or he says mixed it.
Yes.
Yes, he's a poet. So he says mixed it. And that each particular mix, or as you say, mixed roots, is unique to that human. It impacts them in a unique way because we're all there's no cookie cutter for human beings. We're all unique. We are like such unique beings. We really are. Even if we're twins or triplets or whatever, it doesn't matter. We're still unique. Even at the level of the gene pool, even with the same parents, right?
Yes.
So, but he just never knew where he fit because people kept telling him where he fit as a child.
Yes.
If we were born adults, we would have some fight. That's why I often would worry, did I do the wrong thing? I'm the adult here. Could I have made life different for him? I know full well that racialized thinking, saying, and doing is systemic. So I may be able to do something over here and not over there. What shifted for him was when he was able to find a beloved who was also of mixed roots.
Mm-hmm.
And there's where it began to unpack itself, untangle itself, because a thing would happen and she would get it, right? Or a thing would happen for her and he would get it. I mean, relief, healing. So, yeah, I long for conversations where that is the way we brave spaces, not safe spaces, but that is the way that we can talk in groups, that we're not hiding or deferring or settling for. I wish there was a way that we could do that in a number of, for a number of reasons, for a number of, on a number of themes is what I'm trying to get at. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, and it's really tremendous bringing children into the world and hoping the best for them and trying to do your best, and then the world throws shit. And yeah, it's but talking about it is helpful, I think.
Yes. I think that's a powerful place to start, in part because even the vocabulary around it, or like all the, finding the words that feel like they resonate with the experiences, I feel like it's still in process in some ways. And also their global contexts, right? That, like, I remember being in South Africa doing Raptivism work, and folks didn't ask me at all the infamous "what are you" question, and I started to feel kind of strange because I was so used to, like, I just was used to at least once a day someone would, without saying hello or anything. And then I started, and there's a whole history around that, and I learned so much in that experience, and it just kind of broadened to my understanding of this conversation. Also, just in terms of those brave spaces that you're talking about, in local terms, so meaning the local, many places around the globe that we can feel local to. So yes.
I also loved South Africa because when I was there, as a matter of fact, these earrings are
I was I
I
was
really
wondering.
love them. I wear them some days when I feel like I need a particular kind of protection, So when I was there, I had the most hilarious conversation with a woman who was going to the university at Johannesburg. What she was giving me a tour of Soweto, where she grew up, right? And she was talking to me about apartheid, and I already knew apartheid couldn't have died in 30 years. Come on.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But getting there and seeing it alive and well is a different thing. And she said to me, so, you know, in the bus system, you would be colored, Eric. But then over here in this system, you would be black. And we were cracking up laughing about how just crazy town that is.
Mm-hmm.
She said, here, listen to this. She said when they put together the caste system, they didn't know what to do with Asian people, so they just made them colored. I said, what? Just put them in that, just put them in the box. She said, yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was in Soweto, not one person asked me where I was from. And the same thing happened when I was in Brazil, which was just abundant with stories. It would take me forever to unpack all of it, but suffice it to say, the reason why I was there is because they, you know, books and films don't get translated. Books, first of all, they're not written in Portuguese, but then they don't get translated if they are. It's not a common translate to language. It's Spanish, French, and English. And I hope that improves over time. So they didn't know very much about Black liberation movements at all because they had slavery and the end of slavery and nothing in between or after. Like we had the end, quote unquote, to slavery on paper, and then Juneteenth, and then Jim Crow. Reconstruction, Jim Crow. They had nothing. So they were mandated not to say that they were descendants of African people, many of them, many of the young people I talked to. Thereby, there was nothing in their classroom that gave their history as Africans. And Brazil, as you may know, has the largest population of African people outside the continent of Africa. Mm-hmm. And Brazil is huge, huge. There's Brazil, and then there's the rest of South America. I mean, it's that big. So, so in these conversations I was having, I would speak, and people would walk up to me in tears and say, "You've given me permission to say that I'm Black." And at first, I was like, I didn't know what to make of, but that statement kept being said, and I got that they've been all socialized to believe that you can only say you're Brazilian, which is okay, but the hyphenations had caused a problem when these students were younger. So the Afro-Brazilian Museum in Sao Paulo was a brand new kind of a concept. It's gorgeous. If you ever go back to or go to Brazil for the first time, you got to go there. It's astounding. It's astounding. And I learned so much, but people would just walk up and start speaking Portuguese to me. And I understood why. And then another solidarity reminder is this moment I'm going to share with you. When I was there, after I spoke at one of the federal universities, that's like our state universities. And I'd finished talking, and it was a packed room. Most students, everywhere went students. They are the Brazilian movement students. Anyway, and the movement for the land, the Semtara. So this young woman came to me. I can still see her face. A small, brown-skinned woman who looked like a friend of mine in Oakland, a young friend of mine in Oakland. And when she walked up, I did a double take because she looked so familiar. And she smiled at me. She could see that I felt as if I knew her. And I speak limited Portuguese, and she spoke limited English. But we were able to have a conversation, and she said, "You are my sister." I said, "Yes, I am. Do you know why you're my sister?" And I said, tell me. And she said, because one slave ship went left and the other one went right. And then tears started to stream down her face. And then we both cried and we were hugging. And it's that kind of a moment that we all need, that we're not so separate as we think. That all the things that we've been socialized to believe is so dang important, they're really not. However, should we choose an identity like Afro-Brazilian or African American, it's nobody's business but that person. Why should it become so pathologized and criminalized than it is? And when I left Brazil, I was really feeling, I'd been there for almost a little over 3 weeks, working every single day because they didn't have any sense of what had gone on in the United States. I mean, like very little, unless they were scholars and had read a bunch of books and spoke fluent English. You know what I mean? And that should not be expected of anyone. English is not the universal language. Anyway, I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back and live. I wanted to be part of that which changes things. And I thought, not right now. It's a nice idea, but the people there have to do what they have to do. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like Americans want to come and fix stuff. And I watch myself feeling that way. But it's, I did what I could do. But I do want to go back because I love it so much. It's like one of the places where I feel so at home.
That resonates a lot.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we've been talking for a million hours.
I want to, of course, come to a close. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything that you want to remind us to go to? I will make sure to plug some of the resources that we talked about in the conversation.
I would encourage everybody to read Caste, the book by Isabel Wilkerson. It's lovely. And if people are better with audiobooks, then get it on Audible, because you can, some of the chapters, they're all beautiful, but they're sometimes difficult to listen to. But you can pause and come back to it later. But she really, really makes clear that the United States didn't get skipped over in terms of caste. And that's why we struggle so. That's what made it even funnier for me when the South African woman said, over here you'd be colored, but over there you'd be black. And then, I forgot to tell you what she said, but you would never be white. And we cracked up laughing because she was talking about the economics and the politics and the ridiculousness of racism and all those things. Right? It was a very candid conversation that we have trouble. We get very balled up in conversation here in the United States, but everything's kind of simplified in South Africa, simplified in a good way. So I would suggest that book. And I saw a very beautiful film last night. I can't say that everybody will like it, but it has its resonance about how all humans identify, this idea of identity. I guess it's relatively new because I heard about it of all places on a news show. And then I decided to watch it. It is fantastic. If you watch it, please let me know what you think of it. The writer, producer, and performer is a young white man who used to be a card shark. I'm not going to tell you more. You must see it. You must see it. because what the film does is it takes us beyond identity of any kind because of some things that he does. It's beautiful. It's called In and of Itself. In and of Itself. And I thought about the conversation we were going to have today. And that, because when I was little, I had all these why questions from my mother. Well, why are some people poor? And why do some people have nice things? And why do we live in Southeast Washington? And why do all the white people live in Northwest? And why do they have fur coats in the cold Christmas? And some of our neighbors don't have a coat at all or shoes. And my mother would try to answer my questions, and then she'd say, "Okay, sugar, you're gonna have to carry those questions over to tomorrow. You got too many questions." But I was trying to figure how's this all work? And it's based on identifiers, identities, and then how someone sees you and then tells you who you are.
Mm.
It's not just that they think what they think; they tell you who you are.
Yeah.
And so it gets to that. I don't know what his purpose was, but I'm telling you, watching this film last night was so touching. So I would encourage people to watch it and not overthink it. Just be with it. Just be in it. Sometimes we just overthink stuff. And it's not healthy. It doesn't move anything forward. It might further cement our feet in. And, just, it's nice to just see something that is kind of a letting go of a sport. I didn't open up your questions before I came to join you today. Are there any questions that you want to ask me?
I think we covered a lot. And I thank you for your time. Also, I know we've traveled through a lot of different pathways, so I think we have plenty to share and to amplify ahead. And I hope that we'll be able to reconnect again, have some seasons and cycles, and reconnect and share some learnings at another point in time. But I just want to thank you so much for joining today. This was a true gift, nutritious, with all the veggies and all the things. If I could travel through that metaphor, and I'm just so grateful. So thank you so much. Arigato, jirijip, merci, dankjewel, all the things.
Oh,
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
thank you very much. Thank you. It was so wonderful to talk to you. And I want to leave you with a quote that came to my mind when some teenagers said to me, a group of teenagers said, "So, Miss Ericka, what do we do? We're young and we don't know what to do about our world. What advice do you have?" And I said, "Well, I don't have advice." And then I paused and took some breaths. And then this is what came, and I'll leave you with it. Love is a great expression of power. Use it to transform your world.
I'm doing the poetry snaps. Yes. Oh, I have. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
And they liked it. And two of the young girls said, "Aw, I like that." But it did help them, because in a male-based sort of staid structural world, where is the room for love? And love is fierce. What it can do, and what it does when we use it. So I leave you with that quote. Thank you so much, Aisha.
Thank you. Thank you so much.